Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, well, we have plenty to cover here on this beautiful Thursday morning with you guys. Your Minnesota Vikings are a work in progress following the preseason month of August. Following a couple of injuries, we've got a few things to discuss with, Irv Smith, Chris Herndon being acquired as a result of that, and also just the roster construction as a whole. The cuts downs have happened. We've seen kind of the initial 53-man roster and what this team is going to be shaped like heading into the 2021 campaign. And we have thoughts, as always, right? And then we'll hit you with the, some quick hitters. Of course, you guys know I'm going to spend some time talking about Sean Mannion because I'm not thrilled about that. But that's going to be the bulk of the show here. Irv Smith, the roster construction, that type of thing. So that's the game plan for today. Let's get right into it here since we do have a lot of ground to cover. Irv Smith is certainly the headline, right? Like with everything that's kind of going on with not just the Vikings, but the NFL as a whole right now, just in terms of the news cycle. Irv Smith should be on your radar as kind of like the number one piece. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have been, sulking over this, myself included. A lot of optimism probably drained out of Vikings fans in recent days, given what's going on with Irv Smith and his injury. Most recently, it has been reported that he is officially going to be out for the 2021 season. Now, this is important for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, this is a breakout player. I think a lot of people were expecting to see Irv Smith become the guy this year with Kyle Rudolph being released and then subsequently signing with the Giants. I think most people expected that Irv Smith was going to step into this role and become kind of a fixture for many years to come. Well, we're going to have to wait at least one more year for that to happen now. As a result, the Vikings, and this is unfortunate because it feels like we find ourselves in this position every single year, kind of had a desperation move and had to go out and get a replacement with Tyler Conklin also ailing from an injury as well. Brandon Dillon being cut. The Vikings didn't have a great option at tight end. So now it's Chris Herndon's time. And it's an interesting situation. A lot of things kind of happening all at once. But let's start with Irv Smith specifically and just kind of how devastating this is to lose, a key piece. It changes the offense. Mike Zimmer has said as much. It's now going to go from potentially being a 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end team to potentially a 3 wide receiver scheme for most frequently kind of in your base offense. There are going to be changes as a result. And then, of course, just the fact for Irv Smith, you got to feel for the guy. He was set by from fantasy analysts to Adam Schefter to your local, reporters, everyone had Irv Smith as a potential breakout candidate this year. And now that's not going to happen.
Right. And it sounds like too, it was, it wasn't just that, he's going to get more opportunities this year, but it was that he was like lighting it up in practices and in camp and stuff. So that's the disappointing part. And as a fan, you hate to see something like that. So, but yeah, you're right. That's the point I wanted to get to, was the whole, a panic move that the Vikings seem to make every year to kind of make up for an injury that happens preseason. And again, this year happened to be Irv Smith. They went out and got Chris Herndon, he's fine. He's got experience starting in the league as a tight end, had been playing for the Jets. Nothing like spectacular there. I am curious to see how the tight end reps, how the roles work, if Conklin's still going to be starter, if Herndon's going to step in and do a lot of pass catching, what have you. Brandon Dillon is still there. Then they also picked up Ben Ellison, North Dakota State tight end, as well off the waiver wire. So that tight end room suddenly looks very different from this time a year ago, thanks to some injuries and some panic moves and whatnot. But yeah, that sucks for Irv Smith. I think we were all expecting a big year from him. Very athletic. Obviously produced quite a bit last year, given the circumstances, being kind of behind Rudolph for a lot of the time. So he was due for some big things, but yeah, we got to wait one more year.
So let's start here with what we were losing, right? By not having Irv Smith on this team. I kind of alluded to it a couple moments ago with just the overall definition of the offense and kind of what that base looks like, right? What I mean by base is essentially the lineup that they trot out on ESPN for you as the starting lineup. Irv Smith was going to be included in that, and the tight end position as a whole was, of course, going to be a big piece of that base formation for the Vikings offense this year. In the last 48 hours, that has changed dramatically for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, the explosiveness and the style of play of Irv Smith is unique to Irv Smith, right? This is a guy that is able to run 4.4, 4.5, 4.6 in that area. Great straight line speed, excellent lateral movement, and then he's progressed as a blocker as well. So this is a guy who has, in a pretty short time become a fairly solid all-around tight end with great, I should probably say excellent pass catching ability, a guy that could truly be devastating downfield. I've personally likened him to Vernon Davis in the past. I mean, that was the tight end that kind of broke the mold for me when I was growing up. So I see a lot of Vernon Davis and Irv Smith. So you losing that type of piece in your offense is huge just in and of itself. It changes the way you want to go about things. It also changes just how the Vikings are going to approach this season now. The D.D. Westbrook deal looks a lot better right now because while he's not a tight end, he technically will be picking up some of those snaps as an Irv Smith replacement in technically speaking, right? The other piece, the other shoe that drops here is that now you bring in Herndon, who I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than Drew is on Herndon, just because, I remember pre-injury Chris Herndon. And I think I remember, a player who has dynamic pass catching ability. I do not like him as a blocker. I'm just going to say that right now. I know Mike Zimmer said he's okay at it. I don't like him as a blocker at all. I think to me, he's a guy that's not going to be attached to the formation. He's going to be closer to a wide receiver than a true pure tight end. But he offers upside in that regard. He's a great pass catcher, excellent athlete. It's the injury luck with him. And this kind of goes back on Drew's point here about the desperation move. You only get a guy like Chris Herndon if he has that injury history, especially for, a later round pick. I'm not thrilled about it being a fourth round pick. I would have liked to have seen it be a 6th or a 7th. That's neither here nor there. But with Herndon, it changes the style of play just inherently because of the type of tight end he is. You've seen these tight ends in this offseason in particular talk about how difficult this role is, how many different hats you have to wear. Well, Herndon doesn't wear all the hats that Irv Smith does. And more importantly, he doesn't know the playbook yet. So this is a guy who's probably sitting 2, 3, potentially even 4 weeks as he kind of gets accustomed into the Vikings.
He'll play, rotation. But it won't be a big role. It'll be minimized. So, like in terms of fantasy, he won't have an impact right away, obviously.
Right. So you're looking at probably 15 snaps in basic style plays, running a quick flag or something like that. That being said, this deal could go sideways real quick, which makes me, as a fan of, what Rick Spielman does and kind of the wheeling and dealing. This makes it it puts him in a bit of a tough spot where it's like, if this guy gets hurt after not even really knowing the playbook, this goes from being a desperation move that we're all kind of looking at questionably to a move where, this next offseason will point to as being like, hey, this is just another reason why the Vikings have failed in recent years is because they're making these desperation type moves in desperate situations.
Well, and I think it also points that the Vikings do see themselves as a win now team, which is kind of frustrating as a fan. And I mean, not obviously you want your team to be trying to win all the time, but it's like, to me, this roster is not ready to win now. And so you're only, you're risking more of the future for something that it probably won't make a difference this year, right? Like bringing in Herndon, you're giving up a 4th round pick that could be something, that has more upside to it, I suppose, and bringing in Herndon for, I don't know what's left on his deal or whatever, but kind of that panic move thing. And it just brings me back to the Ngakoue stuff last year where, with Hunter's injury,
and Bradford before that, right?
Freaked out. And I mean, there's several examples of this, but the Ngakoue thing, they kind of, we got to keep our team afloat here with Ngakoue and whatever, brought him in and then quickly got rid of him, realizing that they had made the mistake. So, this isn't as high profile as that, but it's just another instance where Rick and the team there maybe get a little bit panicky. And not that, again, I think Herndon will come in, he'll be a solid player. It's just not sure it was worth that price tag right now. And I don't think they're paying all the salary. I think the Jets are going to pay a portion of his salary.
So basically a veterans deal.
So at least the Vikings are paying basically that minimum of it, I believe, or something along those lines. So it's not a huge deal. It's just the philosophy of it is something I don't quite agree with, but there's a lot of things I don't agree with this team sometimes.
You look at the deal specifically, right? It ends up being a fourth round swap for Chris Herndon. The Vikings also get a sixth round pick as compensation in that deal too. The main kind of takeaway from that deal, and I think a couple of guys in the Climbing the Pocket team, put this together right away, is that the Vikings were willing to sacrifice draft resources in order to make it work with the cap, which that to me in itself is a little bit concerning. Now, I want to make sure that I point this out because I know someone's going to say it otherwise, is that I know it's a fourth round pick. And I know that realistically speaking, fourth round picks don't tend to turn out all that well. It's not that big of a deal, generally speaking. And for what it's worth, if Chris Herndon plays to his potential, he's absolutely worth a fourth round pick and it works. That's fine. The question there is kind of within that process. And I think there is some progression from the Vikings based off what we saw last year with the Danielle Hunter situation, where the Vikings didn't even fully understand the injury, at least from what they broadcasted to us, right, with Danielle Hunter.
I suppose,
at least
in
this situation, they've been forthright. They actually broke down exactly the decisions that they made. And for what it's worth, I think the Vikings did a great job selecting the correct surgery for Irv Smith, making sure that he's going to have a long, fruitful career with
not rushing him back
to health. Exactly. And
we're seeing that type of thing with Michael Thomas right now, where with the Saints, where they kind of were like, you have to be playing this year instead of getting the surgery that you need. And now he's going to miss the start of this season because of all that. And actually, to begin the whole thing was Sean Payton was playing him in a game that was already over, and that's when he got hurt. But that's a different topic.
So it looks like at least the Vikings have that going for them. I mean, again, I'm not a huge fan of this deal. I think I could look back on this conversation in a couple months and, we might be completely off base here.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that Herndon walks in and becomes, an important role player on this team. But nevertheless, it is kind of that sudden blow, that desperation move that you hope works out, but it's hard to be optimistic given these circumstances. Now, the Vikings as a whole, I think that this is, another important piece that we continuously bring up is that every time the Vikings make one of these moves, it's a win now move, right? Like what Drew was just alluding to before, that I think there is some discrepancy there between what the Vikings think they are and what the general public thinks they are. It's not just us that are, quote, negative about the Vikings, right? I think that we're fairly objective and we're fairly reasonable relative to the rest of the world. This is a move that says, hey, we're trying to win a Super Bowl right now. We believe we can win a Super Bowl right now. We don't care about that fourth round pick because we think we have the roster composition to get things done now or in the near future. That in itself can backfire immediately, right?
Yes.
If the Vikings go down week 1 to Cincinnati, there's a real shot that they start 0-4 and this Herndon deal, no matter what he does this season, it could look terrible immediately. Now, Again, I'm playing a game of what if, I know that, but I'm saying if you're a GM who's trying to save your job, and that's basically what Rick Spielman is to a degree. I think he's not on the hot seat, but he's getting close to it. It's heating up for sure. If this goes sideways, that we could see a completely different complexion of this, not just this roster next year with all the, the moving parts.
I mean, things could get totally, coaches, it can be a whole new ship, I'm with you on all that. And again, that's why I was so relieved in a way that they did go after Kellen Mond in the draft, there's some sign of forward thinking because I cannot grasp the fact that you look at how the team played last year and you're like, run it back. That's what we want. It's like, I can't understand that line of thinking. I get the injuries, whatever, but at some point you just got to win regardless of the circumstances, this is a singular example. So this is kind of cherry picking an example, but the 2010 Packers, man, how many injuries did that team have? And they went on and won the Super Bowl. They were battered and bruised all season long, lost so many key players, so many starters, and they ended up winning the Lombardi Trophy. So, again, that's one example. And they had one of the best quarterbacks of all time playing on that team. But it's just, I'm kind of sick of the excuses on that, I guess, to be honest. And that's why I'm so upset with the depth on this team right now, because it's football. It's football. People are going to get hurt. You're not going to have Danielle Hunter, Dalvin Tomlinson, Michael Pierce, Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, Harrison Smith, all those guys all year long. You're just not. That's an unrealistic expectation to have, and you're going to have to deal with the depth that is on the roster, which is not something to be trusted. And so it kind of circles all into this whole win now mode that I'm not a huge fan of right now. I think it should be more of a developmental approach. And I'm not seeing that right now. And I think that is jeopardizing the Vikings in the future here a little bit. And this move kind of shows it.
Yeah, I agree. And, you look back at, previously good Vikings teams. And it's not just the Packers that were able to go to run the table despite injuries. It's, it's other teams as well. I mean, the Chiefs had injuries a couple of years ago. I mean, Tampa Bay had injuries. I personally always kind of judge Vikings teams based off that 2009 Favre team. Because to me, I was 7 years old when 1998 happened.
Mm-hmm.
So like my basis for like how I'm going to evaluate a Vikings team goes off of that 2009 team. And if you remember, EJ Henderson went down early in the season, and Jasper Brinkley was your signal caller all the way through the NFC Championship game against the Saints. And I think all of us would agree that that was a Super Bowl caliber Vikings team that should, I think there's a lot of what ifs there that we don't need to get into today. But my point being here is kind of what Drew was saying, is that you got to be able to roll with the punches. Irv Smith is an important piece. He's not the piece. This is not Kirk. You didn't lose your quarterback. You didn't lose Cousins. I mean, you didn't lose Eric Kendricks. You didn't lose Harrison Smith. You didn't lose Dalvin Cook. You lost probably your number 3 option on offense. The Vikings.
But it's like you have to, if you're going to be a win now team, you have to be able to trust the roster you have. Right?
Absolutely.
You have to be able to trust, well, if this guy gets hurt, next man up. No, you're not, no hitch in the system, no time period to get acclimated for some new guy to bring in. And it's kind of a mixed signals bag there for the Vikings. Like, well, if you trust your guys, your win now team, you better trust the depth on your team. And if you don't trust the depth on your team, you're probably not ready to win right now.
Yeah. And that's the truth of it. So I mean, a lot of this remains to be seen. But we do have a good handle on what this team is going to look like now.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of this Irv Smith injury. Again, I do give the Vikings props for getting out in front of this one and kind of dealing with it and getting this thing set before you're starting to prepare for Joe Burrow and the Bengals. We have a good handle of what this team's going to look like. There are some moving parts. Of course, Irv Smith is not the only injury. There are, some real concerns with Anthony Barr, just with
Darisaw,
of course, being, the rookie that has been, hampered by injury throughout camp and into the preseason. And it looks like that's going to make its way to the regular season as well. But as a whole, right, you have an interesting group of players here. It's a good mix. This is one thing I will say about the Vikings roster. It is a good mix of young talent and veteran talent, which generally is a good signal for a playoff caliber team. This is one thing I will give them for sure, is that the composition of this roster in terms of age and development is on par with teams that are going to make the postseason this year. I think that's fair to say. Now, let's look at this roster kind of up and down. We'll go through some of the key hitters here. I don't think we need to go through all of it. Starting with the quarterback position, of course, Kirk Cousins and Kellen Mond are going to be your 2 guys. A little bit of a surprise there with Jake Browning, ultimately being attempted to sign in the practice squad and then deciding not to sign with the team, last I heard at least, based off of what we were hearing with Sean Mannion. So not many surprises there. Again, the running back position, not many surprises. I think most of us thought it was going to be Cook and Madison. AJ Rose comes back on the practice squad, which we, said was going to happen. No, not a whole lot of surprises there. So really the first one for me is at that wide receiver spot. The composition of that specific depth chart, right? 5 receivers, which is interesting in and of itself in a passing league, right? Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, of course, but the next 3 guys here, KJ Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, and Dede Westbrook. That's going to be your front 5 for the wide receiving core. All 5 of those guys are going to play for sure. And it also, you no longer have Chad Beebe. I know he's got the injury, but it's a different group this year outside of your top 2 stars. It's going to be a different type of production. You've also got different styles of players. And I think just inherently, Amir Smith-Marset, him making the roster is, out the gate, is something that a lot of us may not have expected based off of the words early in camp from Mike Zimmer. But I think there is real reason to be excited about this player specifically based off of the progression that he's shown. And he's gotten to the point where he's not going to be a practice squad guy. He's on the 53.
Right. I'm excited about him. And I think the comments you're referring to, I think it was mostly about kind of Zimmer just trying to drill in that point. I don't think he was I think, he did single him out, but I think it was a part of a larger message to the team and to new players that joined the Vikings. Like, if you're going to join my team and you're going to be a backup player, which most of the guys are, then you're going to play special teams. And so I think I took Ihmir Smith-Marsette a little bit of time to get that message ingrained into him. But as long as he figures that out, he contributes on special teams, he'll be a good player for this team. Again, he's crazy good athlete. Sounds like he's going to be a return man potentially. So, and then there's all kinds of fun ideas, I'm sure, that Clint Kubiak's got up his sleeve to get him involved a little bit. So, again, this receiving group, I'm not thrilled about the idea of what happens if the Thielen or Jefferson get hurt.
Yeah.
These guys are obviously Osborne and ISM are extremely inexperienced as, starting wide receivers. Dede Westbrook coming off the injury, not quite sure how that's going to work out. So very thin in that perspective, but in the event all five guys, the top two guys are healthy for vast majority of the season, I think you can do worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's an interesting situation. I think that, the quote veteran Westbrook becomes your inherent wide receiver 3 to start. But I think all three of these guys, Osborne, ISM, Westbrook, any one of them could end up being your number 3 target. Depending on how this, even like the first 2 months play out. I think Osborne's going to be the guy to start, with Westbrook still kind of getting into the mix, making sure he fully understands the playbook, fully recovering from that injury. He's going to probably be your guy to start. To me, it's going to be his opportunity to lose to a degree. But you've also got ISM and Westbrook too, who are going to be fighting for reps, and guys who are going to be productive in different styles of, like, in different ways. Right. I don't think that Osborne, ISM, and Westbrook are the same receiver, right? They're not, none of them are prototypical slot types, right? I think ISM is probably the closest to that. Westbrook, you can play on the outside. He did play on the outside, but he's also been like a Cordarrelle Patterson type, where it's just a manufactured touch player. It's interesting because I don't think there is a true blue fundamental stud outside of Jefferson and Thielen in that wide receiver group. So we'll see how that develops. I'll be interested to watch on, kind of the ways that these younger players, and Westbrook, we're calling him a veteran. He's really not even a veteran. He's a younger player too. So there's real room for potential development there. We talked about the tight end spot a little bit. Brandon Dillon does end up making the roster. I made the mistake earlier saying that he was cut. Conklin's going to be your fixture until Herndon is able to get going. And then Ben Ellefson as well, like Drew mentioned, interesting guy that finally makes the roster there. Offensive line, fairly predictable to a degree. I think Dakota Dozier being cut was a surprise, right? I think a lot of us were expecting him to kind of just make it as the, being the quote incumbent starter. I think a lot of us thought that he would be on the initial roster. But Aliudo, how about that, right?
It sounds like he's going to be the favorite to start.
What progress from this player, by the way, to get to the point where he is now.
Yeah, I know. That was a really cool and positive development out of camp and in preseason, I think, that we didn't really expect. But I think a lot of Vikings fans, it is a little unfair to the way sort of Dozier has been received by fans, I think. And obviously on-field performance is what it is, but like we said, there's characteristics of being, a locker room guy and things like that we don't quantify. So, and it sounds like I think he is back to the practice squad, so he's still around, and that is still, those types of intangibles are still with the team. But obviously that progress from Udo is really important. And if he can bring it to the regular season, that's going to be a nice boost.
Absolutely. And then it's also worthy of noting that Wyatt Davis makes the initial 53 as well. A guy that was criticized early by the coaching staff, the media, et cetera, and then kind of came on late. And I think we talked about him a little bit on the last podcast as being a guy that has progressed throughout the month of August, and he makes the roster as well. So that's good to see from a mid-round pick, and a guy that I think a lot of us were really excited about coming out of, a Big Ten, program, and a guy that has a lot of experience at his position. So that's good to see as well. Moving on to the defensive side of the football now. I don't think there's a whole lot of surprises on the defensive side. I think, we've been saying this a lot kind of throughout the offseason, that we kind of knew what we were going to be in terms of defense, because you bring in so many veteran players that really aren't going to be cut, right? Like there wasn't any expectation that any of the cornerbacks that the Vikings brought in, Peterson, Breland, Alexander specifically, those guys were 53 locks, right? Like there was nothing weird there. Chris Boyd makes the 53. Just on a personal level, I love that for him. I don't know how great of a player he has the potential to be, but really cool guy. A lot of fun. If you've been watching those, the Riddle videos, Chris Boyd is always in the center of those as being hilarious. Love seeing a guy like that make the roster. He's definitely an Energizer bunny and a guy that you want to have on your team when, things aren't looking too great, because he has that positive attitude and that good mentality. So that's exciting to see for him. But outside of that, I mean, you mentioned Ryan Connolly last week as kind of being a surprise and kind of a player that you were particularly intrigued with at the linebacker spot. He makes the 53. Blake Lynch and Chaz Surratt both make the 53 as well. I think those guys are, going to be special teams fixtures for this team this year. But in terms of who your starters are going to be and who are going to be your kind of rotational spot starter types, I don't think there's any major developments in that area.
No. I think the next question then is that I'm curious about personally is like really the defensive end spot quite a bit in terms of how much does Everson Griffin fit in there once he's officially back on the roster? Which that whole thing is, I'm still trying to grasp all of that, but
it's above my head, and I feel like we've been doing
because essentially
this for years.
They released a long snapper and punter Colquitt to make room for guys that they could keep and then put on IR after the deadline, so that those IR guys could then be eligible to come back at some point during the season. Because Irv Smith's on that IR now where he could come back in the event the Vikings make a playoff run. And in 4 or 5 months, he's actually available. But anyway, long story, Everson Griffin's going to be back. Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a rotational guy in there? That's the part I'm curious about myself. But otherwise, everything else seems pretty kind of chalky, if you will. Obviously, we've talked about Dance. They're kind of falling down the depth chart a little bit. And when you bring in, Breland, Peterson, Alexander, like, I think that was a little bit expected for him to kind of fall down, but he's basically cornerback 5 now. Which is going to be different for him, I think. And it's probably humbling for him too, but hopefully that kind of, as we've talked about, hopefully that motivates him a little bit. Otherwise everything's pretty expected. Kendricks, Barr, and Vigil are going to be your linebackers. That Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson dynamic is going to be fun to watch. Sheldon Richardson mixing in there. At safety, Harris Smith and Xavier Woods, as expected. I know Josh Metellus wasn't maybe a favorite player of ours coming out of the draft, but he's sticking around. He's showing up on special teams too. So otherwise, I got nothing else really to add other than the reported interest that the Vikings have in Sean Mannion as backup quarterback, which caused some conversation out there. And I don't think anything's official yet. I just saw that Chris Thomason reported that when he was released, that was at Seattle, I believe, released him. The Vikings then were kind of looking for him potentially to join the team. I don't think I have seen anything official yet come through, but I know you have some thoughts on that, and I do too, actually.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say I didn't mention Josh Metellus specifically. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I like seeing him on there, because that signals a couple of different things for him specifically. If you look at his mock draftable spider chart, right, the athleticism build for Metellus, I think a lot of us saw that initially and were like, this guy has no shot. So good on him, because he's clearly doing the fundamental things right, and that generally makes for a great special teams player. So excited for him. But I do want to talk about Sean Mannion, because I think that this is beating a dead horse to a degree, but the Vikings are forcing me to beat this horse because they keep bringing this dude back. And Drew and I had a fairly spirited and comprehensive discussion earlier about what you want to have at your quarterback position. You want to have 3 quarterbacks. You want to have your staple, your starter. You want to have a developmental player. And then if you have, a guy that's not necessarily, Mon specifically, he's not necessarily ready. You do want to have a guy who can give you quality reps, right? Give you a quote 30% chance to win a football game if Kirk Cousins has to miss time, short time, specifically a week or 2, given, an ankle injury or something of that nature, right? Sean Mannion makes sense in that regard, right? Based on the mold that Drew and I, built up for you guys. It makes sense to have that veteran presence behind Cousins because Mon, in theory, I guess we don't know this, only the coaching staff does, isn't, quote, ready to go yet. So he makes sense in that regard, bringing in that veteran presence. My problem with Sean Mannion continues to be that I don't care how smart he is. I just don't. Like, if he's great at holding a clipboard, that's awesome. Make him a coach. Take him off the salary cap. He's not good enough to win football games as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Straight up. You already know that when he trots out onto the field as your starting quarterback, week 16, in a situation where you need to win the game and you don't have Cousins available, you have basically no shot. That's the only point that I need to drive home here. I don't think I need to say much more than that. Like, you have no shot if this guy has to play. So why not just make him a coach if he's that important to your team in other areas? Go out and sign someone else. I don't know if there's a, quote, better option right now, but there will be. There always is. Cam Newton is out there. If you truly want a veteran guy that can give you quality reps and give you a true shot to win a game, I mean, I know Cam Newton's probably going to be a little expensive, but he also signed in New England at a minimum deal, and he's probably looking for an opportunity. Like, I'm not saying bring in Cam Newton. I'm saying bring him in instead of Sean Mannion, right? Like, there are better options out there. There have to be, because this guy, we know who he is. You just saw how the Vikings reacted to Jake Browning when they found out, quote, who he is, right? They got rid of him. They let him go. They let him do his own thing. They should be doing the same thing with Sean Mannion, because you know who this guy is. He's just strictly not a on-field player. He's an excellent mind, apparently very good in the locker room, sees a lot of things on film. Make him a coach. Please, just make him a coach.
Yeah, and I think the other element is just the unknown of Kellen Mond. That, I mean, we've seen 3 preseason games, and it certainly hasn't been pretty every time. 100% agree with all of that. But we also haven't seen him play with Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson and a first-team offensive line either. So there's the unknown elements to Kellen Mond's game that his potential is certainly 1,000% higher than Sean Mannion's. And so in that event where, obviously we don't want Kirk Cousins getting hurt for the sake of the Vikings. In that event that he does, and multiple games are missed, I like having the volatility of Kellen Mond available to plug and play a lot more than we know what Sean Mannion is. He's going to, throw the ball, dump it off for 5 yards every play. Not going to take your deep shot, and the deep shots he does take are not going to be successful type player that Mannion is. And he's not going to be able to move at all either in the pocket. Makes Kirk Cousins look like, I don't know, Dak Prescott in there moving around. So it's just, I don't get it. I don't understand. I know Mond has certainly shown not a lot, and it's very much a project still, but make him your QB2, because we were discussing a little bit in our Climbing the Pocket kind of group chat a little bit with this whole discussion. And, some people are saying, well, Kellen Mond's not ready. And I'm like, I know, I don't care. Like how is he going to get ready? You play him. I mean, what's the better way to get him ready than by playing him in the NFL in regular season games? There's no better way. And so he might not be ready now. And part of this goes with my thinking that the Vikings aren't ready to win now. So why not have him be your backup? And if something happens to Kirk, play him and let him get acclimated to NFL game speed with NFL team 1 players, like starting players that are all pro, like Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and see what he can turn into. And no, it probably won't be even a, annual starting quarterback. He probably won't be that, but at least find out, right? Find out. And maybe he is a superb starting player. Who knows? But you're not going to know that if you play Sean Mannion over him.
So a couple things off of that. First and foremost, I just want to say, what is ready? Like, what does that mean? Like,
was Tom Brady ready when he took over for Drew Bledsoe?
I don't think so. Was Aaron Rodgers ready sitting behind Brett Favre? Like, I think everyone's like, yeah, of course he was. He's sitting behind Brett Favre for a couple of years. But like, maybe he was, quote, ready when they drafted him. He might have been. Yeah, like, there's no.
Was Deshaun Watson? Who did Deshaun Watson replace in Houston after that? He sat for like 5 games that year as a rookie. It was like Tom Savage or something like that.
Yeah, it might have been Tom Savage. I think.
Was Deshaun Watson ready? Like, was Pat Mahomes ready that first year in Kansas City? Maybe.
I don't know. That's a big thing. Like, I don't know what ready means. And to your point, how do you find out? unless he plays. Like if you think about if you relate this to your own personal life, like your first job out of college, were you ready to start working? I mean, I probably wasn't. I don't know. Like I don't think there's a true definition for what ready means. And moreover, who knows the answer anyways? No one. There's no strict timeline for how to develop a quarterback the proper way, or every team would be doing it the same way, right? There's no there.
Why are the Bears sitting Justin Fields? I don't know that either.
It doesn't make sense. He's not ready.
Why are the Jags and the Jets playing their rookies right away? Or why did the Patriots give up on Cam to start Mac Jones right away? Is he ready?
I mean, we're gonna find out week 1.
They don't know.
No one knows. That's the thing. No one knows, and the answer is the same with Kellen Mond, and that's why he's so much more appealing than Sean Mannion, because no one knows. No one knows what Kellen Mond is. We do know what Sean Mannion is. So it's like the more important point here too is that when you sign a veteran quarterback to have as your third piece, when you have a Kellen Mond on your roster, you're basically saying like, we need you in the event that Cousins misses a week, right? That's basically what you're saying. Okay. If Cousins misses 1 week, that's it. Kellen Mond can put him in there, play like hell. And if you lose, you lose, right? Like it's a 1 week ordeal. Why make it a show?
Why even bother?
Sean Mannion? Like why even bother? Now, if it's a long-term injury, right? We go back to the Peyton Manning quote that I love so much, right? If 18 goes down, we're screwed, right? That's the same thing with the Vikings. If Kirk Cousins misses significant time, this season is over. I don't care how you.
Doesn't matter who plays quarterback.
It doesn't. You could have Patrick Peterson play quarterback. The season is over. Period. So why not have it just be the Kellen Mond show? Find out. Hey, give him some more reps. Give him more opportunities. He'll probably figure it out. And I'm going to go back to this, and I know people don't really seem to care that much with the quarterback position, but the legs that he has underneath him in itself give you an opportunity to win. And the fact that he's not on film anywhere outside of the preseason also gives you a chance to win. Sean Mannion's on film, and we know what his legs can do. With
Nothing.
Kellen Mond, he's an unknown across the league, basically, and he's thought of by us, coaching staffs, GMs, etc., scouts, as a project player. No one's going to fear Kellen Mond if he walks out there. What if this dude goes out there and shows all the tools? The strong arm.
It takes me back to that Joe Webb game, the Philly game. I mean, it's the same thing. Like they certainly didn't expect it. Nobody expected anything. This is his first career start in the NFL. He has the athleticism. Like Joe Webb was a crazy athlete. Viking season was lost, so hey, why not see what this guy's got? And went out there and he made a bunch of plays with his feet, made a couple of really good throws when it mattered, and they won the game when they really shouldn't have. And the Eagles were fighting for a key playoff spot there, and they didn't get that win. Vikings got to play spoiler. I'm not saying Mond is or isn't Joe Webb. I'm just saying like it's a decision similar to that where you've got the high upside type player with also a low floor, but I mean, what's the risk? Your team sucks anyway if Kirk Cousins isn't playing. So
yeah, that's really the only point that needs to be driven home, honestly. Is like if Kirk goes down for more than 3 weeks, I'd say you're probably done. Like that's probably it. Like 3 straight losses, like that's probably going to knock you out regardless. So it's like once that happens, find out what you got. Like the unknown is what is both the good and the bad, right? Like the unknown in itself gives you hope, right? Which is really the most powerful element in all of sports is hope. And Sean Mannion doesn't give you any hope.
It is, by the way, it is sad how little hope I have for this team right now. And the Sean Mannion thing just like, it took me over the edge almost. It was like, okay, I just officially just nothing left. Like, cause like, even it's like, well, there might be a glimpse into the future if for some reason Mond has to play a lot this year. We could actually see, and maybe he's got something and could turn into a franchise quarterback. Maybe like it was one thing I was actually kind of looking forward to this year. It's potentially seeing that now. Not that I want to see Kirk injured or anything, but like,
right.
There was that side of it where if the Viking season was going poorly or Kirk was out or whatever, we got to see that. But then you bring in Mannion and that just crushes my hopes and dreams. And we're back to 2019 where, yeah, I mean,
it's frustrating as fans, right? Because really What you're selling us, other than the ticket to the game itself, is you're selling us on potential, on hope,
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. Maybe that this team could get over the hump some way, somehow, right? And we all want to know who Kellen Mond is as a quarterback. I know the coaching staff does too. The easiest way to find out is to put him into a high leverage situation where he has to operate as the guy. And until you do that, I mean, quote, like, you're not going to know if he's ready until you put him in that situation regardless. Like, it doesn't really matter if it's week 8 this year or, week 17 3 years from now. I mean, all you're doing right now is basically wasting the rookie deal in the event that Cousins goes, south, something happens to him. You're just wasting a year of an opportunity to see who Kellen Mond is, right? Like, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And again, the ready thing, I got questions. The hope thing, I got questions. Like, it's a tough move for me. I don't like it. I'm not happy with it. I'll never be on board with it. I'm going to be stubborn about this one, guys. Like, I don't like Sean Mannion on the roster. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think it ever will. I don't think there's anything that anyone can say to change my mind on this. So, whether I'm wrong, right, whatever, I'm going down. I'm dying on this hill.
The only thing that would change your mind is if he goes in and wins a game as a starting quarterback.
Yeah, but wins the game, right? Like, I'm talking, like, he'd have to go 18 for 22 with 220 yards and a touchdown pass and no turnovers for me to be like, all right, this could work for a couple weeks, right? He's not going to do that though. This dude has a career average of 6 yards per attempt through the air. That's how far the ball travels on average throughout Sean Mannion's career, is 6 yards. He doesn't even average throwing the ball more than that through the air. Like, this isn't average yards per attempt, folks. This is how much the ball travels in the air. He's basically his average pass is a dump off to Dalvin Cook or a quick hitter to Justin Jefferson on a slant. That's basically his average his entire career. What more do you need to know than the fact that the guy doesn't want to throw the ball? Period. Like, he doesn't even want to throw it downfield, let alone can he? We don't even, I mean, I think I know, but you don't really even know because he doesn't attempt it. Like, he's a true game manager. He does not have the potential to be a great player like Kellen Mond. I think it's fair to say that Kellen Mond has the potential to be a great player. Sean Mannion does not. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm standing. I'm dying on this hill, and I hope he proves me wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm dead laying on, by myself on this hill, and Sean Mannion is, the right guy for the job. But I just really don't think that's going to be the case. So let's move on from there. I think we got a couple other things I want to touch on real quick before we wrap this thing up. We didn't mention the defensive end battle a whole lot. I think there's still some question marks there. I don't believe a starter opposite Danielle Hunter has been effectively named yet. It's DJ Wanham and Weatherly, of course, are going to be kind of the guys that were in rotation for that spot. Just, as a fan, right? Or as a fanalist, as we like to say. Who would you like to see based off of what you know about we know Weatherly a lot better than Wanham. I think, there is reason to believe that Wanham gives you more opportunity in the same sense that we were just talking about with Mond versus Mannion, where you don't necessarily know who Wanham is just yet, whereas we kind of know who Stephen Weatherly is. I mean, he's been with the team on and off. I think we know who this guy is at this point, and he's just not a starter quality player. So is DJ Wanham the guy? Does he start week 1, or how did the Vikings approach the situation?
Yeah. I think it'll be Weatherly. I just brought up the Vikings official depth chart on their website, and they have Weatherly as the starter. They also have Everson Griffin on there as behind Hunter. So I would imagine it's updated a little bit. I'm not thrilled about either one. I know Weatherly wasn't super productive last year with Carolina. But, they get another opportunity, and they'll always have that advantage playing opposite Neil Hunter, right? Because, you're going to get one-on-one essentially every single snap. So that whoever it is, I don't care. Just step up and be a viable threat because the Vikings did not have one of those last year when Ngakoue was traded.
What do we need from the spot opposite to Neil Hunter? Like, for a competent
I don't like
quantifying
it. I don't like quantifying it as sacks because I think it's, pressure rate, things like that matter a lot more. But, I want the quarterback to be fearful of both ends a little bit. I think last year, neither end was providing fear for the quarterback. So that's it. And be a viable threat for the other side of the defensive line for Aaron Rodgers or Andy Dalton or Jared Goff or whoever it is that the Vikings are trying to take down. That's it. I mean, there's nowhere to. That's not a great answer because it's not a quantifiable answer, but that's what I'm looking for. Whoever that guy is.
And then, of course, the kind of the inherent follow up to that is we've got three pieces, three moving parts. You've got the starter competition throughout camp and Weatherly and Wanham, and then you've also got the quote wild card down, Everson Griffin being brought back to the team. If you had to pick today, as of September 1st, who has the highest snap percentage of those three guys for you by season's end? It's tough, man. It's an interesting question.
It is. Because Griffin's the wild card. There's certainly a scenario I could see where Griffin ends up just being starter. Like, and I'm gonna go with Griffin just because of that. And I also think they could also move Griffin inside a lot too,
right,
in passing situations. So I don't know. That's my gut right now, but
I don't
have much of a finger on this. So
I think it very easily could be a situation where it's like 40, 30, 30 in terms of like percentages, right? Like they'll just keep testing out who's the most fresh, right? Like put the guy who is sweating the least out there.
And it's not like Hunter will play 100% either. I'm sure he'll play 75 to 80 or whatever it is. So there'll be rotation all across the board, but
that adds to Everson Griffin's snap count probably too, by the way, because he has the most experience snap or pass rushing from Danielle Hunter's spot specifically. Right. So that's just another interesting element to consider here. I think this is going to be a true by committee thing unless someone takes over. And I think I'm with you. I think the most likely candidate to take over as being, a number two threat to Danielle Hunter is Everson Griffin at this point in time. I haven't seen enough from Wanham to merit true, optimism with him. I think he's a quality player. I liked him as a pick. I think that there's real athleticism and moldability there. But I think Everson Griffin is probably going to be the guy. I think that's just by default. I just don't know if Weatherly and Wanham are good enough yet, but that remains to be seen as well. That's kind of the fun of the football season, right? Last piece here before we close this thing out, we didn't touch on the practice squad a whole lot. Right. These are guys that in general are, probably not going to be fixtures in your team at really any point in their career. That being said, there's a reason for the practice squad, right? It's a developmental system. It's the quote D league for the NFL. It gives you the opportunity to stay on an NFL team and develop your talents. We got 10 guys here that are, fairly interesting players. I think that it was strange to bring Abdullah back on the practice squad. That was interesting to me as a quote, who he is guy. We talked a little bit last week about how important he might be as just a locker room presence. And that might just be the answer in and of itself. But most of these guys are younger players, right? You've got Zach Bailey, Jake Vargas, Tuff Borland, Zach Davidson, Miles Dorn, Dakota Dozier comes back. He's kind of in the same light as Abdullah, Kyle Hinton, Myron Mitchell, Perry Nickerson, Wap Filer, AJ Rose, Ty Smith, and Kenny Willekes is your Vikings practice squad as of September 1st. We talked a little bit about Rose. Love to see him back there. Glad that no one snatched him up. I think he's a great running back, number 3 in the event that Madison or Cook misses time. And we know from history that both those guys are susceptible to injury. So like seeing Rose on there. That's really the biggest takeaway for me. I do like seeing the development of Kenny Willekes as well, the Michigan State product who has the potential to move interior and exterior on the defensive line. He's also gotten some hype from his line coach, or I guess his defensive coordinator, and Andre Smith. So you've got a couple of guys here who I think can develop into being, quality players at the NFL level, but there's no one really outside of those two that jump off the page for me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would be curious to know, like, if there's a way to evaluate and rank practice squad rosters in the NFL. But yeah, AJ Rose obviously jumps out. Abdullah jumps out as, again, that locker room type player that his veteran presence, I think we've talked about it before, is going to be huge. Same with Dakota Dozier, actually, having that starter experience. Should be a big help too. So yeah, I'm with you on those takeaways. Nothing huge there, and also flows with what people saw in camp and stuff. Like, those are the guys probably you see, like, a Tough Borland, like, yeah, that's probably a practice squad guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said Andre Smith before. I obviously meant Andre Patterson. But that being said, I think that about concludes our Hour-long analysis or so of this 53-man roster. Is there anything that we missed that you wanted a quick touch on? Patrick Jones makes the roster as a rookie as well. That's nice to see. Armin Watts is back as well. I don't think, again, not a whole lot of, shockers here. Harrison Hand making the roster might be a bit of a shock to some people, but I really liked his development, his progression this preseason. Is there anything else that we're missing here that we didn't talk about here today?
I don't think so. I'm scared. I'm
What is
I'm
the
more
biggest concern? Because I'm scared too. What is your
I'm
biggest?
just scared of like Eric Kendricks or Harrison Smith getting an injury. And at that point, I will have no faith in the defense anymore. Just because what happened last year, like these guys got hurt, right? Kendricks got hurt. Dylan Hunter got hurt, whatever it was. And these guys were out, and that whole position group crumbled until, there was no pass rush last year at all, right? Hunter was gone. That was it. And then obviously Griffin was gone too. So if these guys are removed from the piece we saw from last year, there's just nothing to work with. And that concerns me a little bit. Now, if everybody's healthy, great. I'll enjoy the games. But now it's like every time a play happens, I'll be cringing because I'll be hoping nobody gets hurt.
It is very nerve-wracking, specifically at that linebacker spot, especially, given the recent developments with Anthony DeBar. I believe it was tendonitis that they've been talking about with him specifically. That's just not.
Do we know if he's going to even start week 1? Do we know that?
We don't. And that's we've talked about.
Still have Troy Dye, starting, which he made a couple of splash plays in preseason for sure. But it was like, okay, well, here we go. We're already starting this process with kind of inexperienced players getting the massive important reps week 1. It was I was in a Twitter conversation today with it was Ted Glover, one of our favorites, and he was saying like Vikings aren't cooked yet, but they're quickly at that point where another injury here or there, and they're all of a sudden they're toast. It's the Irv Smith thing is kind of it's one domino leading to another, and if another one falls, the whole thing might tumble over. So I don't know. I'm not confident.
In theory, I mean, you look at the lineup that you just mentioned, right? The starting trio of linebackers, if the Vikings are in that base 4-3, Kendricks, Barr, and Vigil is your starting group, right? Barr already has the injury question mark. It's, very well documented. Kendricks has injury history. Yeah. I don't want to call him injury, ridden or anything of that nature, but if he goes down, all of a sudden you lose your chess piece in Barr and your primary tackler and just your overall biggest weapon at that second level of your defense. Those two guys are irreplaceable, right? There's nothing you can do about that. And you're already working on thin ice. Like if you do have to imagine if this group becomes Nick Vigil, Troy Dye, and let's say Ryan Connolly.
Yeah. You're not that far from that. You're really not.
You're not.
Barr's already maybe gone for the first game of the season. And it takes one play to knock Kendricks. It takes one play to knock any player in particular out. And it just seems like relative to the rest of the league, I said it over and over, the depth on this team just seems to be significantly lacking compared to other teams, where in the past, even with other Vikings rosters, injury to Eric Kendricks, you're like, oh, that sucks, but like it's not going to knock the defense completely off kilter. And I feel like we saw last year that's exactly what happened. So it's a very extremely scared and not even optimism, just like scared anticipation for the season.
Yeah, I mean, this thing could go south real quick. I mean, you need to win that first game, and it seems like the Vikings might be missing some key pieces in that week 1.
Plus, Christian Darrisaw too. We didn't talk about that much. His lingering issue. We have Rashad Hill Rashad Hill starting at left tackle right now. That's
that's interesting.
Not awesome.
That's not what you want, right? Again, we've talked about Hill in the past. Some great spot starter. He's done a good job with that. But if Darrisaw has to miss more than 3 weeks, real concern about your blind side, Kirk. Real concern there. So
that's what we need.
It's tough. It's tough. And I know we've gotten the comments and stuff from people where it's like, it's the beginning of the season. Like, this is time for optimism. Like, why aren't you guys finding optimism?
I'm sick of, and I've been guilty of this in the past, but like bending the narrative to like make it like maintain optimism. Like today you get like, oh geez, all these Vikings fans are doom and gloom now because their tight end's out for the year. And it's like, well, In a way, yeah, but we're doom and gloom now because we were already depressed about the rest of the roster, and this is just another domino falling. So yes and no, like, take it for what you will, I suppose.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. I mean, I'm not going to knock anyone who's still optimistic. It's just that
I
from my
respect
vantage
it.
point.
If you're still optimistic, I respect it. Like, you're good for you.
Yeah, this has been a trying time for Vikings fans for sure. These last couple of weeks have really tested our patience, and I suppose we'll see. But I am concerned, and if this thing kind of falls apart early in the season, as it very well could, um, you might have Mond in there sooner than we all think. Just by this spirit of kind of moving forward, and it's a situation where if this team starts off wrong on the wrong foot, they're immediately got their backs against the wall because of their schedule, because of their competition within the division and the Packers specifically. The Bears are effectively giving us a little bit of a break by not starting Fields immediately. But
unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable, right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's the title of the podcast, by the way, too. It's a tough situation, but there are reasons to be excited still. Football season is right around the corner. And of course, that means that we'll have 2 episodes coming up in the near future here. I believe we will speak to you guys one more time before the Vikings officially kick off. And at that point in time, we will move to our regular Tuesday, Thursday schedule on the Climb in the Pocket Network on Daily Norseman as well. So that's kind of the game plan moving forward. The next time you hear from us will be our first preview episode of the season. We'll be taking a look at the Bengals, how the Vikings match up with them, getting an opportunity to see Joe Burrow firsthand, being the first team to see him coming off of injury. That's kind of exciting just in and of itself, as if you're a football fan and, an NFL fan as a whole and not just a Vikings fan, the opportunity to see a guy like that come back from injury and, potentially dig into your Vikings. We'll take a look at that and the other players on that roster as well. So that's the game plan for the upcoming season here. As always, we appreciate you guys listening to us, kind of going through the motions with us, especially as you get into the dog days of summer here. But we have arrived at the regular season, and both of us are very excited to, be creating content for this and moving the show forward and with our regular programming of Tuesday, Thursday. So look for us there, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcast. We are there, either on the Climbing the Pocket Network or on on our page specifically, the Unbelievable Podcast. You can find us on YouTube as well. As always, I'm just going to give you the disclaimer. There's nothing to see. It's just Drew and I talking. And, if it's your mode of audio that you choose.
What a great ad.
I mean, people are always like, well, you should be driving people to all your different streams of content, right? And I'm like, nah, you know what? You probably shouldn't be seeing us on YouTube because, who really cares? We're not doing anything special. But on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, etc., that's where we'll be at. So please continue listening to the show. We appreciate you guys, taking an hour out of your day with us, and we're excited to get this thing rolling. So, oh, he's got the Kleinsasser bobblehead. There you go. There's a reason to watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, right there.
All right, folks. It's been real. We'll see you. We'll talk to you shortly here about the Bengals. But until then, enjoy the rest of your summer here as we ramp up into the fall. And we will catch you next week.